bang, 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 bang. Hello, everyone. I am Derek Haynes, the Chocolate Botanist, and this is The More You Grow. I am here with a master grower of plants, and I love people who can grow plants because when you know better, you grow better. And I did this show, this podcast, as a way to be able to connect you all to legitimate growing people. Now, when it comes to those of us who are growing, who are doing the beautiful things as providing you all with legitimate, phenomenal plant care. There's no one better than somebody who's been doing it forever. Forever can be more than 2 or 3 years, more than 5 years, right? Because when you have been growing a long time, you run into a lot of things. And we have this phenomenal woman here, right? We switch places a little bit because Derek is trying to outdo stuff. This phenomenal woman right here, Luna Whitcomb. Luna, how are you on today?
I'm doing great, Derek. How are you doing, man?
I'm good now that we're here. I'm going to talk about myself real bad because
Go
me
for
and
it.
Luna have had our wires crossed, and it's been pretty much me. I've been mixing up my times and dates every time I talk to her. I don't know what it is. I don't know if she has like some haze around her that makes me confused. I don't know if it's just me and my own klutzness and my own short attention span, but I want to formally be like, thank you for being so kind to me and being so graceful to work with me as I've continuously screwed the pooch on coordinating talking to you.
You're fine. Things happen. We all have busy lives and stuff, and here we're talking right now. So
We are. You see how nice she is? This is how I know y'all are going to be great. So we're recording this live. If you have comments and questions below, throw them down. Whoops, I clicked on something over here I shouldn't have. Throw them down in the comments. We want to be able to hear from you all. Um, For those of you watching this in the future, throw your questions down. Maybe Luna will come back and answer some of your questions. Make sure you're following her on all platforms and supporting her. But let's jump into it. We are going to be talking about a plant that social media seems to have a little bit of a prejudice against. In my opinion, it feels that way. It feels like some type of data AI recognition will look at this plant that is legal in some parts of the United States and some parts of the world, and it'll be like, X and just block it out. I've seen creators who are weed creators, weed connoisseurs, weed cooks basically lose their accounts. They make platforms money and then they lose their accounts, which is horrendous to think about. They were great enough that you could get ads off of them and then you just take them down one day without warning. And it is a horrendous thing to consider. That plant, the cannabis plant, is a scintillating plant, a scandalous plant almost to a certain extent, mainly because it is not as bad, in my opinion, medically or botanically as tobacco has been or hops has been, but we look at it like it is demonic. But we have this great grower who is showing us the beauty of that plant, the value of that plant, and the stinkiness of that plant. Luna, please tell me your views because you know this plant better than me. What are your views on cannabis?
well, I mean, I've been cultivating. First of all, I know that it can be risky even to say that c word on these platforms too.
It probably is. I should
Um,
probably say something else. Talk about that herbaceous perennial that so many people love.
uh huh. Um, so I mean, what do I think about it? So I've been cultivating it for 15 years now. I do like living soil cultivation approaches, which means that I integrate organic and regenerative amendments, compost, earthworm castings, and typically like food and like harvesting waste byproducts to use into custom building soil that's like balanced, has like proper nutrient balance ratios, like for the nutrient ions and whatnot. But I also integrate different like fermentation techniques, solid state fermentation, anaerobic, aerobic fermentation, um, to make nutrients more available into like liquid form to add into the soil and stuff like that. Um, as well as focusing on like trace minerals and making sure that every piece of the puzzle and all of the nutrient ions are balanced in a way to maximize growth rates, but also provide like the cofactors required to biosynthesize like a full range of volatile organic compounds to make sure that your C-word plant is the stinkiest, as you put it, the stinkiest as possible. Something happened. Yeah, I got stretched out. Okay. And so what do I think about it? I mean, I see it as a huge benefit. You know, it's medicinal. There are some problems with it too. It can create different mental health issues in people if not used correctly or used too prematurely or too young.
Mhm.
You know, I kind of see it as like a tool. And like any tool, it can be used properly or improperly. And you can build something with it, or you can really hurt yourself with it. So, you know, as my profession, I cultivate,
Mhm.
but I actually like don't even smoke that much. Um,
Now, see,
I
that's something that people probably would assume. They'd probably assume you just be just consistently in a cloud of smoke every day. That's wild.
no, I smoke a little bit at night sometimes.
Hmm.
Like if I want to like relax and like watch a movie or something like that, like I'll smoke a little bit, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but as far as like daily smoking and like functional smoking, like no, I don't at all. I don't smoke socially.
Hmm.
I don't smoke during the day at all.
Wow. So then what drew you to the plant? Because, you know, and this is not to say this is typical. Some people who I do know who are growers were growers because they were like, I'm a plant person. I already love this plant. Let me just grow it so I don't have to buy it. Like, what drew you to the plant?
So I used to be a big stoner, right? Um,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. So at the time, you know, like high school and through college and stuff, I was a big stoner. I loved smoking all the time. But the more just like normalized and like abundant it became, the more it was just like, okay, I don't know. It just wasn't as big of a deal, I guess.
Hmm.
And I just found that I didn't want to smoke it all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. I love that history.
Yeah. Um, but oh wait, never mind. Were you gonna say something? You continue. You go ahead.
No, look, I love to hear from you. You're getting your voice is amazing to me. So I just wanted to give you space and place.
Oh,
So with that being said, you talked a lot about different processes you use
hmm?
in order to feed your plant. You used a lot of big words that I know,
Big
but
words.
yeah, you used a lot of big terms that my people may not know. Some people don't know what anaerobic is. That's a big. It's simple to us sometimes, but it may not be. Can you give a without giving out your secret sauce? Because I know every grower has their secret sauce. And this is just of any plant. Every grower has something special they do. I show y'all a lot of stuff I do on social media, but I don't show y'all every product I use and how often I use them. I give y'all touches, but I
Uh-huh.
can't let y'all be as great as me because if y'all move in the neighborhood and then your patio looks better than mine, I'm gonna be mad. So without giving your secret sauce, I'm a very competitive person. Without giving your secret sauce, can you run us through some of the inputs you're making? Because it sounds like you're making these yourself. Can you run through that?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a lot of different approaches and techniques that I know how to do, and sometimes I use all of them, sometimes I don't. And kind of like I was talking about earlier, like, you know, well, it's different, but okay. Everything is like all these different approaches are like tools. Um, and some of them are going to work better in certain applications than others. And so something that I'm really big into is using lactic acid bacteria serum, which is a probiotic. It's a lactobacillus serum, and I like using that to break down like masticated plant matter. And that'll like ferment, and then it creates like a liquid anaerobic solution. Like it's anaerobic. I
Uh-huh.
ferment it, I seal it anaerobically, which means no oxygen. It just means
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
sealed without oxygen. And I know you know, but I'm explaining to your
Yeah,
folks.
yeah, yeah. No, I know you know. That's what we
And,
want. We want the people to be able to understand. Keep going.
yeah. And so I seal it anaerobically with a like a little it's like an air valve with a little water in it, and it bubbles. It doesn't let
A
oxygen in, but
bubbler.
it lets a bubble.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's
Ooh.
CO2 out. I let that ferment. You know, I'll add it's 1 part lactic acid bacteria serum, 20 parts water, and you can add 1 part molasses and just ferment it like that, and just multiply your lactic acid bacteria serum inoculant into a large amount of liquid, or you can add plant matter, which has its own whatever, maybe monosaccharide, polysaccharide, just sugar source. In the liquid, you add your plant matter to it, and it ferments it. It kind of breaks it down, and it makes the nutrients more readily available. I wouldn't say entirely readily available. Like, you're not going to completely translate the nutrient content from a plant into just like available nutrients for the soil necessarily. But the fermentation helps make it more available. But I think the real value there is that the lactic acid bacteria serum, the lactobacillus itself, the probiotic, is like an opportunistic microbe that can kind of potentially competitively exclude like other pathogens and harmful bacteria, not bad bacteria, but just potentially pathogenic or potentially harmful bacteria.
That does make sense, because part of people, when you think about your systems you're growing in, whether you're growing in water, you're growing in soil, whatever, when you have other microbes that are beneficial, just taking up space and resources, that literally can block out all of the other stuff you don't want in there. And it's amazing you mentioned, I use bubblers because I make kombucha. This is actually, I'm drinking my own booch here that I've been brewing off of a series of yeast I've been wild harvesting, that I've been kind of basically making like a trash can hooch, if you will, of kombuchas. And I use bubblers in that way, but I've never considered using them for a lactic acid bacteria. That is beautiful. So you've pretty much made almost like a fermenter, really. You're fermenting and cultivating your own cultures to be able to use. That is phenomenal, party people, because microbes are needed in your soils, they're needed in your solutions, they're needed, and to be able to harvest it yourself is phenomenal. I love it. That is amazing. I'm just sitting here thinking, because now I want to be like, are you using, I'm just going to go ahead and ask, because these questions are now for me. You're using like a mason jar, I'm assuming, and like one of those setups, or are you using like a plastic bubbler? Again, whatever your secret sauce is, I don't want to answer that. You let me know when we turn to another question.
Oh, none of this is my secret sauce.
Okay.
I mean, I have like recipes of mine that I've put out there a whole bunch and stuff, and the way that, and I'll get to your question, but the way that I see it is like, Gordon Ramsay can put out a cookbook, and anyone can follow it, doesn't mean they're going to make it like Gordon Ramsay,
You're right about that.
and it doesn't mean that they can make cookbooks either. Wait, your question was,
so what are you holding this in when you're fermenting?
Oh,
is this like a mason jar or a plastic? Like, I'm trying to envision.
So usually what I do is I just take a 5-gallon bucket, and I'll take about 4 gallons of milk, like whole milk, or if you can get like cream top milk, that's gonna be the best one. Like if you can find like locally sourced like cream top milk from like a local farm, that's gonna be the best, because all the local microbes are gonna be adapted to the environmentals of that area, so they're more likely to survive and thrive in your particular climate. So it's better to use local stuff, and it's also better for the economy and stuff too. But there is a scientific reason to use local milk and stuff like that. Anyway, pour like 4 gallons into a 5-gallon bucket, and you need a little bit of space. And then what I'll do is I'll take like a rice starch, like I'll get like rice off of starch, and I fill it up in like a little mason jar, like a 2,000 milliliter mason jar. And I'll put like a coffee filter or paper towel over the top of it, and I'll wrap it with like a rubber band, and I'll find a thick, lush like canopy area outside that's not exposed to sun, but you can tell that there's a bunch of heavy, like healthy vegetation there, right? And I'll put that underneath the canopy, like the low kind of canopy stuff, and it'll collect just like local microbes. It essentially is just collecting a bunch of bacteria, right? I'm leaving starch out in the wild as collecting a bunch of bacteria. I leave that overnight. It'll develop like a pellicle, like a thin film of bacteria that like sits on the top. You know?
Okay, pellicle. I love that. Keep going.
Yeah. And that's like what a SCOBY is. It's technically a pellicle, you know? And
You better be teaching me words. Keep going. I'm sorry. You've taught me so much in this couple of minutes we've been talking. Keep going.
woo! Okay, I'm going. Okay, and then I'll take that rice wash that's now just full of bacteria, and I take 15 milliliters of it and I add it to the 4 gallons of milk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you cover that and you seal it with a lid, but you put one of those bubblers in it also, right, to keep it anaerobic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to off gas CO2 as it ferments. So I let that go for usually it takes like 2 to 3 days. But what it'll do is it'll separate into essentially curds and whey,
Mm-hmm.
which is like cheese. Like it'll ferment and you'll have cheese on the top. You're pretty much making cheese, like you've made cheese, right? But
Okay.
you've made it with bacteria. You haven't made it with an isolated species of bacteria that usually makes cheese to make like a kind of particular cheese. Like they have specific bacteria that they've isolated in all different parts of the world to make different types of cheese.
Mm-hmm.
What you've done is you've made a kind of like cluster of random bacteria that you found in your yard and you've made cheese with it. um, and so you separate that cheese curd off, and the whey, the serum, the lactic acid bacteria serum, is filled with probiotic lactobacillus. What you've done, though, is since you've introduced all that bacteria from the rice wash into a lactic acid rich environment, only lactic acid bacteria serum can live and multiply in it. Does that make sense?
That
So
makes perfect sense.
you're not multiplying some random weird stuff, you know. Um, you're introducing it into a lactic acid environment. So you're getting lactic acid bacteria serum. And then that you can use raw at like 3 milliliters per gallon to give to your plants. It's full of enzymes, it's full of probiotics, it's full of beneficial bacteria. Don't use too much of it because it's full of enzymes and you can damage your plant. So like 3 milliliters per gallon of that raw lactic acid bacteria serum. You can then use that to ferment with a larger amount of plant matter. So what I'll do is, now that I use 4 gallons of milk. It usually makes around 3 gallons of lactic acid bacteria serum.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is I'll take that. I'm like going off on all this stuff.
No, I love it. Go off.
I'll take 2.5 gallons of the lactic acid bacteria serum and I'll add it to a 55-gallon barrel. And then I'll fill it with as much plant matter as I can. Like I'll usually blend it up. I'll blend up the plant matter and I'll add it to the 55-gallon barrel. I really like to use beets. I like to use like a diversity of polysaccharides, a diversity of sugar sources, monosaccharides, polysaccharides. They're complex, simple and complex carbohydrates. Because the wider diversity of sugar sources and food sources, including like lipids and polyphenols and polysaccharides, the more diversity of all these compounds, the more diversity of biology is going to be fed by them. So what I like to do is I try to find a diversity of prebiotics, polysaccharides. So I like to use red beet. I like to use aloe vera. I like to use cantaloupe and peaches and premature fruit too. Like I really like to collect like premature berries and stuff like that too. Things are going to be really high in organic acids, and like premature pears, premature apples, and then like have really mature ones too. Things that have fallen off the tree and are starting to like rot and stuff. And that through that fermentation, like it'll unlock some nutrients. But what I really think the benefit is the organic acid profile and the biological profile.
Mm-hmm.
And the potential for like phytohormones. Like the organic acids can be like phytohormones also that we're introducing to our soil that can like stimulate different like metabolic processes in the plant, like physiological responses in our plants. Like for example, like jasmonic acid or just auxins or
You're taking me back.
gibberellins, cytokinins, and stuff like that. I think that there's a bit to be said about the biology potentially breaking those things down so that they're not viable. But I think there is also something to be said about it preserving them as well. And that particular conversation would require a lot of lab testing that most low tech, nerdy dirt people don't have access to.
Because they're expensive.
Because it's super expensive. Um, but yeah, that's a part of some of the stuff that I like to play with, and I have a lot of fun approaches like that I like to do. But that's how I make my anaerobic stuff. So it would be 2.5 gallons of lactic acid bacteria serum, a whole bunch of plant matter, and then fill the barrel up with water, clean dechlorinated water, and I let that ferment for 3 weeks until it reaches about 5.5 to 5.7 pH.
So then, just for those of you who are keeping track, because I like to think of money inputs, right? I will get some products for free that are different bacillus species and stuff like that. Some things I pay for because I'm laid off now. I don't have a job. But when I did have a job, I made great money, so I could spend it on like crazy plant stuff. So you can take a, let's say, $5, because you're in Oregon, is a gallon of milk like what, $5?
For a
If
gallon?
that, yeah, like
That's
it's
probably a
probably
lot.
less than
Yeah.
that. Like that's, if you're getting like, if you're in like Hawaii or something, you spend $7 for a gallon of milk, $3 on a good day here in Carolina. You can get a use out of that gallon for a while because you probably make this what, once a season? Like how often are you having to use this gallon of milk?
So they're called fermented plant extracts is what people call them, FPs.
Uh-huh.
So I made the one that I still use 2 years ago. And what I'll do is, because I like to water in um, plant matter, and it's not for nutrient sources. I like to add like the juices of beets and the juices of aloe vera. Um, oh, thank you. Um, I like to add the juices of plants and stuff like that, not for nutrient content because that's not how that works. It has to break down by the soil, but I like to add it as a biological stimulant, because organic acids stimulate different physiological processes in plants, and the diversity of sugars will stimulate specific profiles of biology in the soil.
But did you say 2 years ago? You made this 2 years ago and you're still using what you made 2 years ago?
Yeah. So what I do is I'll blend it and I'll use the juices from it, and then I'll take the plant matter and I'll throw it back into the FPE, into the barrel. And so I'm continually adding to it. And then and then if I take a bunch out, I'll just add more water to it. So every time I'm taking stuff from it, I'm adding stuff to it. And I'm just I have an endless cycle of lactic acid bacteria serum inoculant, of lactobacillus inoculant, and food for my plants pretty much.
Wow. So that's what I'm saying. So you haven't had to do that gallon of milk situation in 2 years.
No, I did it once 2 years ago. I'm still using it because I
That's
just
amazing.
yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
That is amazing. So you are getting, and again, like water cost or whatever, but like for a negligible amount, party people, you can get so much use out of something legitimate. And notice she said legitimate values. She didn't just say mix this and then pour it on. She gave you mils per gallon, right? She's giving you dates and times, approximations, non-chlorinated water, considerations like using local things. You said cream top. Did you say that? I had never heard that term before. I was
Oh
like, you
yeah.
are teaching me. I was like, I need to go back through this and write some stuff down because I was like, I don't know none of these words. This is amazing.
Ah.
Wow. Just explosion here. I'm glad we finally talked because this is outstanding.
Oh yeah. That's just one of my tools, my toolbox. I got a whole bunch of cool, juicy stuff like that to talk about.
Look, I see. We're gonna have to just have you on more and more because I think if I take any more in, I'm gonna pass out on this floor. My bed is right here. I'm probably gonna chip a tooth. And nobody's gonna love me with a chipped tooth. So just to show real quick, the user Mac is here. We got a couple of people here. If you throw your comments in, you can ask your questions. We're talking about growing plants, specifically one herbaceous perennial that Cheech and Chong used to love heavily. Wink, wink. When we are talking about this Mac character, he said at all different levels and different ages of each stage, beginning and end the process. Actually, loved your whole explanation of the process you use. It's amazing. He is just loving everything you said. The user Mac. I don't know if you paid him. I didn't, but he is giving you all the props in the comments. I want you to know.
Cool.
This is just one of many. One
Sweet.
of many. This person is here because you are amazing. So Luna, since we're here, and we're not, those of you who are just tuning in, we've been here for around 25 minutes. We're only going to be up here for maybe another 5 because I don't want to push it. We might do another 10 if you got time.
You, I'm here.
Okay.
I've done 3-hour podcasts. If you want to keep talking, we can talk.
Look, I've done longer ones, but the people, they don't be giving me play like that. Like I've done some where I've done an hour and just gone and gone and gone. And then those people be getting it. And I'm like, when it's just me doing it, the people be like, man, Derek, and they just leave me like my father did. And I already have abandonment issues. It's okay to laugh. He did as he got in the airport and left my mom in the hospital.
Oh God,
We're not talking about that. I don't know how I got there. I wasn't supposed to jump there today. So we're gonna keep going then. We'll take it to maybe an hour and we'll see. Because I'm feeling this, because I'm learning, I'm literally learning so much. And if nothing else, this is helping me. I don't grow, I'm not in a state where I can,
uh-huh.
but this is dope to me. So then
It all translates, I mean, it's all plant,
it is all
I,
plants, but
I I think the thing that I love most about the C plant, the M plant, the W plant,
mm,
is that since it's such a valued cash crop, it gives you some wiggle room to really like do a lot of experimental and like high-end cultivation techniques that wouldn't be really economically viable to implement into like ornamentals really.
mm,
It allows for like a research and advancement of like organic soil growing techniques that wouldn't have been really even attempted had we been like only growing like ornamentals and stuff like that, just because it's not worth as much, and so like
mm,
increasing the quality and vigor and like growth rate of the plant directly correlates to the value of the plant,
mhm.
while that isn't really the case for most like ornamentals. And so I really love that with this plant, it gives us the potential to up our game like higher and higher and higher, to like know how to grow plants like really, really healthfully. And then those things can be translated into growing any other kind of plant,
True.
you know. And I'd love to just like give, because I know the majority of the people who follow you are looking for ornamental grow tips and ornamental advice.
They are. They're looking, well, that and like veggie plants. And the one thing, so and you are on the money with that. I have a good friend who worked in and does still work in weed companies as like a head grower, director of cultivation and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So a lot of the products I use now that I will tell people about, I learned about because of him. Like
Okay.
these microbial products and the stuff you're talking about, you and him would just have a ball talking over my head about different microbial things and stuff like that. And I feel like a child botanist when I'm listening, like, Mommy, Daddy, please, I want to talk. Use science words I know. But, and I know these words, but it's not often I get to use them, so I'm rusty. But it is astounding how much or how better we could be growing everything.
Mhm.
Like, and I would think about that even with food crop production, how much better we could be growing if we were using microbial inoculants, whether you bought them, you made them, or whatever. Like
Mhm.
you already, like those inputs that you're purchasing, especially here in the country where I am, are just freely available to a certain extent. Like they're just either being sown back into the field, which can kind of be beneficial, or they're just being put in a scrap pile of composting, which again is still compost. It's like beneficial, like six is one, half a dozen of another. But I I live for a day where everybody is growing to their full potential, and that's where this podcast is about growing to your full potential. So with your growing that you're
Mhm.
doing, and you're doing all this work, are you doing this because you working with a company and doing this? Are you working for yourself? Are you
I work
like do
for
you have
myself.
staff?
No, I do mostly everything myself. So I co-own a farm with my business partner. But then I have I have my own seed breeding company, where I sell genetics and stuff like that. And I make genetics, I sell genetics. I also have my Patreon, that people subscribe to, where I provide like my recipes and all my different approaches and stuff like that to implement into like organic growing practices. Um, I write license applications for different companies sometimes, and I do consulting work also.
Wow. So I definitely want you to send me that information for all of that so I can make sure I put it in the caption
Mhm.
and promote you and all your good knowledge, because while y'all are getting this information for free, and I do love giving out free information, we
Oh, this is the easy stuff.
have this is,
This
well, this is easy, but even then, this easy stuff is something that, like, so let's talk about the simple lactic acid bacterial solution and then your process of making it and you refining it. Like,
Mhm.
where, like, let's go over a quick timeline of you learning it, who you learned it from, to like refining it now. Because that timeline, and the reason I say that is there's some things where I will give to people that I'm like, simple. You do this, you use the slow release, these products, you use them kind of like this, boom. You recycle soil. I have a video, I recycle soil. I have so much soil in this house. If you lived a little closer to me,
Uh-huh.
you would never have a want for soil or pots. I have so many soil, I have so many things. I don't understand why I keep all these things. But the people still need to be able to find you to give you somebody's money, because you dropped some stuff that blew my mind today. So I'm actually gonna hop off that first tangent because now I'm still like, my mind is still spinning from all the excitement here. With your genetic company,
Mhm.
can you tell us about you jumping into the genetic train and give the people an overview of what that means, and a simple view of like genetic hunting for that specific plant we talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. So um when the first farm that I worked on, was it the first, at least one of the first ones, right? Um it was in Northern California. I'm a Northern California kid. And the farm that I was on, this guy was like all organic, regenerative, living soil grower. Everything was grown in ground with companion plants and integrating, composts and earthworms and, just using
That
the
was
land.
probably beautiful.
It was amazing. And it was also borderline. Never mind. um,
You
but
just tell me later. Keep going.
I'll tell you later. Um, but there was a huge abundance of plants there,
Okay.
with a huge abundance of genetics that had been collected by him and his community for a long period of time. Um, and the diversity of the genetics were staggering, and there were a few that really stood out. And he was really into breeding and into making new crosses, and to he would like to, what he called, bulletproof them, where he would do his phenotype selection by almost broadcast planting this stuff and letting whatever lived keep going and whatever died get culled out, kind of thing. And
Okay.
whichever ones were the strongest he would like breed and stuff like that. He almost did like a land race kind of cultivation approach, where he
Okay.
let natural selection take its course, kind of thing.
Mhm.
um, but from the foundation of what he was working with, there was quite a few genetics that I just found to be really, really special. And through learning about genetics and how genetics works and how to use alleles and phylleles to um, really work with dominant and recessive traits and perpetuate certain characteristics and stuff like that. I just found it super fascinating. I found everything that he did really fascinating. There was some woo-woo kind of bullshit going on there too, um, that drove me kind of crazy. But you know, there's definitely some woo going on there in Northern California as well.
We
But
love
like
a woo.
the real woo woo, and
Oh,
you know what I mean? I'm talking about like spiritual woo wooism. Yeah, yeah. Um, and but I learned a tremendous amount there too. But there was a point where I stopped learning there, and um, took some of the genetics, asked for some of the genetics, got them, and started working my own lines, um, using some of the processes that he had. But I also had to unlearn some of the things that I had learned there as well. Um, and that's how I originally got into it, was from this particular farm that was back in 2009.
oh, that was such a different time then.
It was a very, very different time.
Wow. And
Yeah.
then from there, you have started cultivating your genetics and being able to do that breeding. And that is Again, superb to me. I'm glad you followed that dream. I'm a storyteller. I try to be more of an interviewer with this podcast situation, but I'm a storyteller and I
Yeah,
like to
we're just
listen and
talking.
learn. And then I like to start with telling my own stories. I had a vision of breeding roses, this,
Huh?
which is a flower. I can say it's amazing. You can say some plant names and not the other. I really hate that. I really hate how censored social media can be, but whatever. We're going to keep going. I had a vision of breeding roses because I got my grandmother many years ago, or actually maybe around 2009, 2000, actually no, it was around 2008, 2007. I got my grandmother, no, I was driving then. 2000, no, I wasn't driving. Either way, around the time between I was 16 to 18, I got my grandmother some Chinese tea roses from a place in New Bern, where I'm from. I'm an Eastern Carolinian from a place called the Plant Farm, which no longer exists. And I got her these hybrid Chinese tea roses. And for those of you who don't know, those tea roses smell like heaven. They smell like beauty and love and some other things. I was going to get a little lascivious, but since this is our first conversation, I'm going to keep it there. You know, I can be a little wild sometimes, but we're going to keep it real good today. And they just smell just phenomenal, just apples and honey and fruit and everything else. And I was like,
Yes.
I would love to breed these roses and to be able to take the time to make lines named after powerful Black women in my life. That was my vision. And yeah, I know you're excited, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah.
a
That's so cool.
this is a yeah, you're not gonna like the next part of this story. So I
Oh,
made the
okay.
mistake of telling this to a person who I used to work under, and she was like, well, that's not really a good idea because the plants, they take so long, roses do, to grow the seed, and you have to do so many crosses to find anything viable, and it's just all a mess, and da 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 da. And what about zinnias? And this, and I'm like, I don't want, like, zinnias don't smell, like Telosias don't smell. Like, I wanted a fragrant, beautiful thing. Like, my great grandmother is Vivian. Her mama is Hasty. Hasty Clark is my great. So I have a relative, Hasty. I wanted to be able to have lines again named after these people. Who would think of a Hasty Rose? It could be something cool. But I made the mistake of letting somebody talk me out of the thing that I wanted to do. And I'm so grateful that you kept with it. And I tell this to anybody who keeps with the dream because I was young enough, and even though I was in my 20s, young enough and impressionable enough where I trusted this person and I shouldn't have. But going into these genetic lines, what are some of your highs and lows of doing this? Like when you are doing this, like I'm sure there's the excitement, and then there's some things where you're like, I hate this. Let's talk about the hates first, and then let's end it on the high.
What do I hate about breeding?
Yeah, like if you're when you are doing this genetic searching, like this whole process of I am finding these things, I am finding these genetics. Like, is there anything where you're like, this is frustrating, or I hate this part, or this is the pits versus the
Well, I
highs of,
mean,
you know,
you can make a cross and it's just terrible, and the whole thing is just wasted.
mm,
um, I mean, there's definitely times where you have to just discard you have to discard an entire like line because it
mm.
didn't work out.
Oh
Um,
God, an entire
yeah.
line? How many plants would that be?
I mean, it would be seeds, like how many seeds, and it depends on how many you pollinate. But
Oh God.
so what? So there's a few different approaches to breeding, and some of
Hmm.
them have more risk. Some of them are more frustrating than others.
Hmm.
Um, so I know when you do that on my screen, it looks all stretched out and elongated. I don't know if it looks like that for people who are watching. Um, do you see
You
what I'm
look
talking?
good on you look good on my end.
Okay, it looks like stretched out and elongated. Um,
I'm watching on the StreamYard, and I'm watching on the YouTube. So on the YouTube, it looks like you're just live by yourself on Instagram.
okay, cool.
Yeah,
Um,
something's up with my settings here. I just have to figure it out for next time. But yes, lines. We're talking about lines.
Yeah. So there's a few different approaches that you can take to breeding, right? And ultimately, it's always to create something unique. Okay, cool. Thank you. Um, Ultimately, at least for me, I want to create something
Mhm.
unique. I want to create something that has a fantastic aroma, like you were talking
Yeah.
about, or a fantastic vigor, or a massive yield, or there's resistance to different pests and pathogens. There's things that will grow better in certain climates, and you can hunt phenotypes or genotypes that have those characteristics through growing a whole bunch of different seeds and seeing what thrives or has those particular characteristics. So if you're trying to adapt it to a local environment, you'll see what thrives in that local environment. If you're looking for particular characteristics, may it be how pretty it is, how colorful it is, how the aroma that it has, the unique aroma that it has, you can find them, and then you can cross them into each other and create other generations, and hopefully get those traits to come back out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes, you can take two high yielding, dense plants, and cross them to each other and just get this cluster of traits that are nothing like each other. You get all of the things that you didn't want from both of them combining.
Oh,
Um,
yuck.
and it's just a wasted effort, and you got to can the whole thing. And that can happen from breeding too close to the original family lines, which you see a lot of now because a lot of people are growing genetics that are kind of like in the same sphere of
Mm.
lineage kind of thing. Like they're all very related to each other now. I
Okay.
like to use things that are kind of outside of that gene pool, like old school
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I like to use old school stuff, and that's a little bit easier to predict typically. Um, there's like making feminized seeds, stuff like that, where you take like a female clone of a mother plant, and you add silver thiosulfate, and you deplete the ethylene content of the plant so that it no
Mm-hmm.
longer produces female sex organs, and it's actually forced to produce male sex organs. And then you use that to pollinate other female plants, and you end up with seeds that will only grow female seeds.
I
However,
always wondered how they did that. That's amazing. I'm sorry. Keep
cool.
going.
Yeah, I can show you. I can send you information on the exact process actually, um, and um, and when you do that, the you can use a clone of the same plant. You can literally clone the plant, take two clones of the exact same genetic, turn one of them into a male, pollinate the other
Mm-hmm.
one with it, and then the seeds themselves have almost no variation in their expression. They're like clones for the most part. There's a little bit of difference, but for the most part, you're made like seed clones that are all female seeds. Um, so that's like a cool thing that you can do, but those genetics are prone to hermaphrodite, because they're originally two female genetics. They weren't supposed to it wasn't supposed to pollinate the other one, but it did because they all have the genetic capacity to do so. They all have the genetic capacity to express both male and female sex organs, um, which is true in a lot of different animal kingdoms, which I
It
think is very
is.
interesting. Um,
Oh my goodness.
and Yeah, people like to breed with seed. People like to breed seed on clones. There's a whole bunch of different ways of doing it to try to make it more simple and effective and stuff like that. I like to do seed on seed and seed on. Actually, I've done all three that I mentioned. I have a feminized seed line. I have seed on seed breeding, which is my lunar cheese line, and then I have my raspberry moon cheese line, which is clones on clones. Um, and that one's more focusing on like bag appeal and stuff like that, while the lunar cheese line is more about like really unique characteristics. And then I needed feminized stuff to offer, so I made a feminized skunk line.
I remember seeing that. That's actually so we originally connected because I was posting something probably about JADM and KNF, I believe, which
Mm-hmm.
is Korean natural farming. And there was somebody who was like, Derek, you don't know what you're talking about. The people use this in the industry. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And then they tagged you. And if I could have had a conversation like this with you, because you were talking great in the comments, which number one, I was like, anytime anybody can sit there and spell a lot of these big terms in the comment, which takes some time, especially for me, I'm like, the letters are mixing up. I'm already like, you know what you're talking about. But the fact that you just broke all of this down and you list all of this off, you are a freaking wealth of knowledge.
Oh, thanks.
You are a freaking wealth of knowledge. And Mac is saying here, mind blown. My mind is blowing up right now because again, here in North Carolina, we can grow hemp. And I've started maybe the process of trying to do it. I don't know if it's changed now with, everything that's changing in the world of the Americas, but too much changing. Um, but I always sat here and was like, well, how could you tell me a seed is feminine? And now you done broke it down. Because I have a friend I could have asked, but I was like, y'all got to be lying. There's no way you can know a seed is feminine, but that is amazing.
Right. Yeah, there's no way of determining like if a typically made seed is female or male, or that's not real. People say it is, it's not. but you can chemically alter a plant to have a female pollinate another female that will make only.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So then, my God. Usually I'm not speechless because usually I'm like, oh, okay. And then we just go. Some people blow my mind. I'm not gonna say they don't, but you have just been a nuclear warhead in my
Oh,
brain.
thanks.
You are
Keep going.
throwing me.
I
We
love
are
it.
gonna
I love how
we are
appreciative you
definitely
are.
look, because I love learning. I literally love learning. And anytime I can like start putting pieces together in the old noggin, I'm like, wow, tell me more. So wow, 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 wow. So then we talked about the lows kind of losing a line. And I feel like you kind of mentioned the highs of, getting the traits that you are looking for and that you are going for. Um, we talked about some of your lines briefly.
Mhm.
When you are looking, I guess so, I'm imagining every grower is going to have, of any plant, is going to have their general traits that they're all looking for: yield, um, it's resistant to pest and disease, something that's going to be strong and hardy. And they're all going to have their little quirks that they're looking for. Like with a friend, I wanted to breed um, plants. I was gonna give our secret sauce away, but we haven't realized that plan yet. I'm just gonna tell you later. But me and a friend had a breeding idea, and we had a business plan behind it. And I almost gave up our idea, Stephen. Luckily enough, I realized where I was. Like, we're not just recording this, we're live. I can't give that out. But we had an ideation and we were going to look for these traits. With that, are there any specific quirky traits that you look for that may not be in the majority of trait finders' wheelhouses?
So I think our objectives would be very different. So you're talking about breeding like flowers, right? Or just ornamentals in general?
The friend and I was talking about breeding the plant that you're breeding.
Oh, okay.
We had an idea. Again, I'm gonna tell you after this. Once we're off of here and we're not live anymore, I'm gonna tell you the idea because it was a whole. I had a whole business plan, everything. I know enough about enough, but I'm a creative genius. You give me a bit of an idea, and I will come up with the rest of it in a heartbeat. But the yes, I'm sorry. Back to you.
So there's a few things that you need to look for. So
Hmm.
it's always fun to create something very, very unique and different. Um,
Yes.
and there's always the potential for that. The best way to, but also you have to keep in mind that the industry has a particular standard and a desire for things and a demand for things that if you stray too far from, it's just going to flop, and it'll only be
That makes sense.
appreciated by a smaller amount of the population.
Okay. Okay.
For example, I just went to Thailand, and I judged a landrace cannabis competition, where I was in the Isan region. I was in the northeastern part of Thailand, and I think it was like 25 different farmers of landrace growers came
Uh-huh.
together in a tournament and competed for the best landrace genetic, or the best grown landrace genetics. And to explain what landrace is to people, it's plants that have been naturally selected without human intervention or without human selection, human selective breeding, um,
Hmm.
for generations, hundreds, thousands of years, right? And
Hmm.
each region of typically Asia where this plant originated from, it had adapted to specific topographical environments, right, to express itself in different ways. For example, when you're closer to the equator, and I'll get back to your thing. This is a very long roundabout
No,
answer,
no, you.
but I want to
I'm
be
envisioning
thorough.
what you're saying. Go ahead.
And so the plant adapts to very specific topographical conditions and creates what's called terroir, right? Which is a unique expression of the plant. You see it in grapes and in tobacco and coffee all the time.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is different. The same species of plant is expressing itself in different ways because different phenotypes have been naturally selected, but also it's adapted to different environmental conditions. One being their photoperiod. So like on the equator, they only have 13-hour days. So their plants have flowering periods that are like 28 weeks long or something like that, because they have to grow and get larger in a strictly flowering photoperiod. Plants like that develop very unique characteristics. And if you were to take those and breed with them and bring them back to a modern day market, most of the time people aren't going to want a genetic that has extremely large bracts size, gets really spindly and strange, and takes 28 weeks to finish. However, that experience when consumed is far removed from any of the experiences that you're going to get based on the huge difference in ratios of organic acids and volatile organic compounds that really create that entourage effect that's going to change the way that it gets you high.
That it hits you.
And so unique things for me, the big one, you have to have density, you have to have yield, you have to have trichome density. People nowadays want things that are going to extract well. So like gritty trichome heads, elongated trichome necks, so they can use it to make their concentrates and stuff. The structure, you don't want it to get too tall too fast. You don't want long internodal spacing. You want things that can stay kind of dense but still get very large. I like to grow things that make like a candelabra shape. And if you look through my profile, you can see that my plants all kind of get very wide and have like a candelabra or like a menorah shape. So you can always create unique expressions, and people won't necessarily appreciate it because there's like an economic viability that needs to come into play. But it's really cool to have them. So to answer your question in my massively roundabout way, aroma is going to be the big one that people are after. Because everyone can always find things that turn purple, things that turn a little pink, things that are orange, things that are bright green. But the unique aromas have the window of aromatic expression has really narrowed in the past since legalization and commercialization. Because a lot of the same genetics got passed around because they're really, really pretty. And that's kind of all people look for now, is if it can go on Instagram and be flashy and pretty and look really good. And it may smell like cardboard and smoke like nothing and taste like nothing and make you feel really uncomfortable when you ingest it, but it looks really pretty. And that's why a lot of people that I know, they don't even enjoy it anymore, because they're like, oh, I have this stuff nowadays and it just gives me a panic attack and I feel really uncomfortable and I don't even like it. It's way too strong. It makes me feel like crap, and that's one of the reasons, because people they think that higher percentages of concentration of the active chemical. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but the concentrate, the percentages, the potency of it. People chase these really high numbers of potency, thinking that that's the only thing of value. And then they want it to be pretty and they want it to be potent, but they don't look at the other compounds that create the real unique effects of it. And that's where I think the value lies. And I honestly think that flower around the 15 to 20% with a very high aroma is significantly more enjoyable than something that's just been pumped with chemicals to just pull these huge numbers and look really pretty, and you smoke it and you just want to die inside and like leave the party.
Yeah, we don't want nobody to leave their party.
No, but that's me personally.
That is amazing. So it's amazing you mentioned that because when it comes to can of banana, I made up a name and I was like, let's see if we can try this and get away. When it comes to that can of banana, I remember seeing so many videos of pretty orange and purple things
Hmm?
and being like, wow, these are amazing. Because it for me, being a person that doesn't smoke, maybe I was around it as a child or from a family member, but even then, it was just like them doing stuff that they've been doing for however long, you know, in the 90s and in the early 2000s. It was just green. It was just green. So to see them oranges was like, why, amazing. But it does make sense that when you breed for one thing, you do kind of tend to lose out on something else. So that is something that I would never thank you for. You are freaking amazing. So we got a question here. I don't know if you can see it on your end, but it is the user Max saying he wanted you to talk about uh eliminating a whole breed you created if it somehow hurts and eliminated because it was your baby in an aspect. So like, did it hurt to let
So,
it go, your child?
so you get numb to it after a while. um,
I
I mean,
wanted
I
you to give
remember
a
when I
heartfelt story about this. It hurts every single time.
so I mean when I first started cultivating, the thought of
Yes.
killing any plant was like, she's so beautiful and I love her and I put so much love into her. I don't want to kill her, you know? Um, but after 15 years of that, it's like this thing's got to go. And
I'm
you just
glad you're
and you
like
just throw it and it's done. You can't think about it anymore. Like if a plant gets sick, you're like, there's so many times where it's like, I want to nurture you back to health and back to thriving. And there's this particular good feeling that we get as cultivators to like save a plant that's getting sick, especially any kind of plant. If
uh-huh.
something's unhealthy, to revitalize it, it's like I am the bringer of life. You know what I mean? But like, uh, no, I mean, when something isn't working out, you got to cut your losses and you got to move on. Um,
Wow.
and you can't. I think there was times before when I cried too. I put a lot of work on something and I'm like, oh, like this is my baby, and I don't want, like, maybe if I do this, blah 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 blah. But no, just gotta move on. Lessons of non-attachment. You gotta call that thing and move on. Um, and yeah, there are lines that it's just like, well, this just didn't work. I remember I had one for whatever reason. Um, there must have been just like a recessive trait that came out. But I made this cross, and the two parents were sativas. They were both like 9 to 10 week flowering strains, and when I crossed them together, the offspring was like it was at least 16-week flowering strain. So like I was growing it outside, and by the time that it was supposed to be harvested, the thing was barely starting to flower at all.
Oh God.
And it just like, and it's just, when it's something like that happens, you can't provide those seeds to people that are trying to grow them outdoors. You're going to ruin someone's season. And that's kind of what happened to the space that I allocated to it. Is I wasted that space. And when that happens, it's like, I can't use these, and I just had to throw them all away.
Oh
But yeah,
goodness.
it sucks because it was such a rare lineage stuff, and like, sure, I could have tried to work it forever and made it not like that, but
Oh yeah, like the user Max said, cut your losses.
mm-hmm.
Ah, that is hurtful. That is so hurtful. I couldn't imagine. That's probably why it's great that that person did discourage me from breeding because I'm like, I spent all this time. I'd make cuttings now, and I'm like, these house plants. I'm like, I can still get it somehow. It's rotting all the way down the stem. I can still save this.
you
It
can
never works. It
you
never
can
works for me.
sometimes. But yeah.
Whoa. Whoa. You have taken me into a lot of great emotions, and I could talk to you for hours, but I still got to clean this apartment of mine up before I
Okay.
leave tomorrow. So I think here's my last thing. Those of you watching, ask your questions. Mac, I'm sure you're up here. Ask your last couple of questions. There doesn't seem to be much of a delay, so this should be great. And thank you for also doing this. This is my first go at doing a StreamYard on my own. I've had some that I've used from other people that were already set up,
Hmm.
but this is definitely going to evolve how I do this in the future. And you're a superstar. Whenever I become rich and famous, I'm gonna remember little old you. I'm gonna
Okay.
remember little old you, and I'm gonna send you all types of stuff. So let's do this. Let's talk about the one thing or whatever things you people are talking about, our special, flowery friend that we're talking about, was something that they may say in reference to it or do in reference to it that throws you off, that may grind your gears. This is your time to be on your soapbox. For me, I hate banana water. Banana water and cinnamon for cuttings and stuff is
Uh-huh.
something I can't stand. And I know some people will swear by cinnamon and it being a fungicide and all this other stuff. But Derek has also had a mess of fungus on cinnamon in this very room I'm in. It was a terrible sight to behold. There were so many gnats. It was a horrible time. So there's some plant hacks where I'm like, stop it. And those are the things that like grind my gears. Um, what are some of your plant peeves, if you will? It could be something that somebody says about this plant, a vision, a hack, a thing that you in your 15 years is like, nah, this ain't it.
Um, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. There's a whole bunch of things that drive me crazy that people say, and I mean, there's all that viral plant content on social media that's just full of
Oh God.
absolute nonsense that gets more views and makes more money than anyone else who's actually providing real information.
It
That drives me
sucks.
crazy. The whole soaking thing in water and stuff like that. Or like just giving your plants sugar water and sure it'll work, but it's not a nutrient. And I don't know. I wish I just wish and this is what I do, right? I wish that um, people would learn more about the biology that's required to grow healthy plants. A
Hmm.
lot of people are really focused on NPK, which will grow your plant, but it's the beneficial biology that's going to keep your plant from rotting, that's going to keep your plant from getting sick, from getting septoria, or help prevent it, right? Help control the infections. Using organic inputs, like amendments and earthworm castings and soy aminos for forms of nitrogen and stuff like that. Um, you're not only introducing the nutrient ions that are used to biocatalyze the growth and formation of amino acids into proteins and grow your plant, but you're also introducing the enzymes that catalyze that the biosynthesis of these building blocks for plants and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I just wish people would get away from the subscription to chemical ag as being so superior because it's sterile, when bacteria is such an important part of animal life and human life, from healthy gut biomes to healthy soil biomes,
Hmm.
and how it affects our brain and how it affects the environment. Ornamentals can be grown, you know, I think just much better. I just wish people would integrate biology into cultivation practices more and understand that diversity of inputs in like a living soil and an organic soil will ultimately result in more aromatic plants, from what I grow to what anyone else will grow. Um, the more diversity of inputs, the more aroma you're going to get expressed from it. Um, and I just, yeah, and it's so simple, and there's so many cool ways and fun ways, like I was talking about earlier, to integrate them, that are way cheaper than going out and buying stuff all the time too. That
Hmm.
you have plants that are more healthy and last longer, don't die, and you spend less money growing it, and you learn a lot more, and it's a lot more fun. I just wish people would. I wish that information was out there more, and I try to put it out there more. But I think that what I cultivate has kind of paved a way for these techniques to be implemented because it's worth a lot more, and a lot more different approaches could be like implemented to get a different like expression from that end product because it is so valuable. Anyway, maybe I didn't explain that right, but
I think you did. You did a good job.
Yeah. Was that your question? I kind
Yeah, I
of just
mean,
soapbox, but
it's a chance for this question is definitely a chance for people to soapbox and for you to talk about something that upsets you. And pretty much what you said was it's not just you go to a store and get that miracle in a box and then this is the perfect chemical or nutrient input. But there are more than one way to milk a goanna goat. That's pretty much what you said. And goanna goats don't exist. I try to throw that in. My grandmother used to say I smelled like a goanna goat when I was a child. And that was to say that I smelled terrible. And I thought that was a real animal until I was in my mid 20s to late 30s. And then I realized it wasn't. Um, so you gave me a definitely great answer. Um, that made me want to jump back into something else, but we're going to save that for another time because again, I still got to clean up. So
okay.
with that being said, my dear, the Mac wanted to know if you have a YouTube. Can you tell us your channels real quick where they follow you? Those of you who are watching in the future, it will be in the description of the video of this podcast, wherever you're seeing it at. Most likely it'll just be on the YouTube for now. So you tell the people where they can find you, how they can connect with you, how they can make sure they give you some good value for the value you add in their lives.
Thanks. Yeah. So my main account that I use the most and do the most stuff on is my Instagram at Luna All Day, which you can see right there. It's
Mm-hmm.
LUNALLDAY. I've done a lot of podcasts. If you just Google that, Luna All Day, or Luna Whitcomb, you'll find a whole bunch of podcasts that I've been on. I've been on the Future Cannabis Project. I've been on, It's All About the Biology tour. I've been on, a lot. I've been on a lot. I've been on Mr. Grow It, multiple different YouTube channels and stuff like that. Chad Westport. I've done a lot of things with Kevin Jodry. And these people probably nobody knows who I'm talking about because they're my industry people. But if you just search me, Luna All Day, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff. But most of the content that I make is on my Instagram at Luna All Day. And in my link, there's or in my bio, there's a link to my Linktree, which then has my Patreon, which will take you to my Discord, which has all my recipes and discussions on cultivation and stuff like that. And breeding, there's like I think like 50 different subjects that we cover, all like in the organic and regenerative kind of categories. And I have a website that just went live. It's called moongrownbotanicals.com. And that has all my genetics on it. And if you have any questions and stuff, you can message me on my Instagram at Luna All Day. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about whatever.
She is so phenomenal. Y'all, thank you for being a part of The More You Grow today, where we talk to Luna Whitcomb about this particular plant that the social media gets upset that I talk about. I should have an acronym that spells it out or something. I'm gonna figure that out. Um, when I do, you all will know. There's not a set schedule for this as of yet. I talked to a couple of other people, so you'll be able to see it. People who do controlled environmental agriculture, the plant that Luna works on, people who are community gardeners, community who are raised bed gardeners, people who are farmers, people who are arborists and master gardeners, to be able to talk to you all. Because yes, I'm a whole plant biologist, but I don't know everything. And I want you all to be able to connect with these real people. This woman up here for an hour has been just tripping the light fantastic and giving us so much great information. So please be sure to tune in next time. Check her out, follow her, share her to all of your friends. And y'all have a phenomenal time. Thank you for joining. Deuces. And
Thank
then
you.
I said end.